For today's meditation, let us read from 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 1 to 6. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Arise and depart with your household and sojourn wherever you can, for the Lord has called for a famine, and it will come upon the land for 7 years." So the woman arose and did according to the word of the man of God. She went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she went to appeal to the king for her house and her land. Now the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Tell me all the great things that Elisha has done." And while he was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life appealed to the king for a house and a land. And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, here is the woman, and here is her son whom Elisha restored to life." And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed an official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, together with all the produce of the fields, from the day that she left the land until now." The story of the Shunammite woman in this chapter is a powerful reminder that with God, there are no coincidences. Every event, every person, and every circumstance is part of his sovereign plan to fulfill his purposes. The Shunammite woman's story begins several chapters earlier when her eager and selfless heart to do good is revealed. She noticed Elisha, the prophet of God, often passing by her home and decided to provide him with meals. Not stopping there, she convinced her husband to build a small room for Elisha, complete with a bed, table, and chair, so he could rest whenever he visited. Her actions were purely selfless. She sought nothing in return. When Elisha offered to speak to the king or the army commander on her behalf, she politely declined, saying, "I dwell among my own people." 2 Kings 4:13. This response showed her contentment and independence. However, Gehazi, Elisha's servant, pointed out that she had no child, and Elisha prophesied that she would have a son within a year. Her kindness and hospitality were seen by God, who orchestrated events to bless her. As Galatians 6:9 reminds us, let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. The woman's faith became evident when her promised son fell ill and died. Despite her grief, she did not panic, but immediately sought Elisha, believing in God's power to restore her son's life. Elisha's miraculous intervention brought her son back to life, demonstrating God's faithfulness to those who trust. Through her actions, the Shunammite woman showed unwavering faith, a willingness to do good, and selflessness. Her story reminds us that God sees even the smallest acts of kindness and repays them in his own time. In this chapter, Elisha warns the Shunammite woman of a coming 7-year famine and advises her to leave her home. For a woman who once declared her contentment in living among her people, this must have been a difficult decision. Yet she obeyed and moved with her household to the land of the Philistines. God's guidance often requires us to step out of our comfort zones. Obedience may feel uncertain, but when we trust Him, we need not fear the consequences. After 7 years, the famine ended, and the Shunammite woman returned to find her land occupied by others. She approached the king to plead for its restoration. What followed was a striking example of God's providence. At that very moment, the king of Israel was speaking to Gehazi, Elisha's servant, asking him to recount the miracles Elisha had performed. Gehazi was narrating the story of Elisha raising the Shunammite woman's son when she arrived to plead her case. This seemingly perfect timing was no coincidence. With God, everything happens according to his plan. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 46, verse 10 and 11 declares, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. What I have planned, that I will do, says God. The king, moved by her story, not only restored her land, but also granted her the produce it had yielded during her absence. The king's curiosity about Elisha's miracle and his decision to act favorably were not random events. Proverbs 21:1 says, the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. This truth is echoed throughout the scripture. In the story of Joseph, the cupbearer forgot Joseph for 2 years, which seemed like an act of cruelty. However, God's timing was perfect. When Pharaoh needed his dream interpreted, the cupbearer remembered Joseph, setting the stage for Joseph's rise to power. Similarly, Ruth happened to glean in the field of Boaz, leading to her inclusion in the lineage of Christ. Psalms 37 verse 23, the psalmist says, the steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. God's hand is evident in every detail of our lives, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. The story of the Shunammite woman reminds us that nothing in our lives is coincidental. God sees every act of kindness, every moment of faith, and every step of obedience. Even when circumstances seem out of control, he is working behind the scenes to fulfill his purposes. As Jesus said in Matthew 25:40, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Mark 9:41 echoes this promise. Whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because you belong to Christ will by no means lose his reward. We may not always understand why God allows certain events in our lives, but we can trust that he is in control. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap the reward if we do not give up. Galatians 6:9-10. With God, there are no coincidences. Every detail of our lives is woven into his perfect plan. Like the Shunammite woman, let us trust in his faithfulness, obey his leading, and continue to do good. God will use our faith and obedience to accomplish his purposes and bless us in ways we cannot imagine. May the Lord help us to live with this assurance and to walk confidently in his sovereign care. God bless.